Welcome to Watchat, where we chat about watches and other facts of life. Today we're going to review the SARB017, also known as the Alpinist. Now, with the re-release of the newer Alpinist, which is the SPB121J1, will the SARB017 remain as the people's favorite Alpinist, or is it all finished? Let's check that out. At the outset, let me say this. I'm not a big fan of this tone of green. Neither am I a big fan of the golden indices with the hands as well, especially with the cathedral hands. However, after wearing it for a couple of weeks, I understand why people sing its praise. It does have its own charm. Particularly when the light shines directly on it, you see how the green blends in together with the gold, and how the sunburst dial reflects it all together. Now let's look at the specs of this watch. The SARB017 is powered by the in-house 6R15 caliber automatic movement. It has a sunburst green dial, and it uses LumiBright on the hour, minutes and second hands, as well as the dial. It has a date at the 3 o'clock mark, and the case itself is polished and brushed stainless steel. The crown here is a screw-down crown with an S sign on it. It has a sapphire crystal with anti-reflecting coating. It has approximately 200 meters of water resistance and has a power reserve of approximately 50 hours. The dimension of this watch is approximately 39.5mm in diameter and 12mm thick. The lug width here is 20mm, and the strap is made out of brown leather with buckle closure on it. One thing about this watch is I really don't like the strap. It's a little bit too plasticky, a little bit too hard, for my taste at least. Now this particular watch here has a compass feature in the internal bezel, and that internal bezel is adjusted using the second crown, which is located at the 4 o'clock mark there, and you rotate it, and that's how you rotate the compass in it. If you're a little OCD like me, you'll probably be very frustrated with the bezel here. I find the bezel a little bit too loose for my taste, and every time when you adjust and get it aligned, the knob gets moved around quite easily and it doesn't point at 12 o'clock on the dot. This watch has a quick set date and a hacking second. Now, about the date, there's also another flaw I find with regards to this watch. Every time when you were to set the date using the hour and minute hand, the date tends to change at 5 minutes before midnight. In other words, it tends to change about approximately 11:55 p.m. Now I find that a little bizarre. I don't know if this applies only to this watch or does it apply to all of the SARB017. Please do share with me at the comments below if you know what's the deal with this. Now let's compare this with the newer Alpinist and see what's the difference. With regards to the specs, it's more or less the same with its predecessor, except for the fact that it's now powered with the 6R35 movement, which has a 70 hours power reserve, and it is slightly thicker, measuring at 13.2mm. That's because of the cyclops it now has on the date window here. As for its appearance, when you put both these watches side by side, immediately you notice that the dial itself has a big difference. The one on the left is the SARB, whereas the one on the right is the newer SPB watch. The newer watch has a darker tone of green on its dial, whereas the SARB has a kind of lime green on the dial. The other difference is the bezel itself. Now, the SARB has a black bezel, whereas the SPB watch has a dark green bezel. The knob on the bezel is also slightly different. The SARB has a white end in the red triangle, whereas the SPB has a black end in the red triangle. The word Seiko is slightly flatter on the SARB as compared to SPB, and the SPB has the Prospex X logo on it without the words Diashock 23 Joule. The leather strap is also different. The SPB has a lighter tone of brown, and it is made out of a better quality compared to the SARB. The biggest difference between the two watches is the date. The SARB has a date window surrounded with a square box printed in gold, whereas the SPB has none of that. The other difference is that the SPB has a cyclops on it, whereas the SARB does not have one. If you look at the date, you will also notice that the date in the SARB has a black backdrop with white numberings, whereas the SPB has a white backdrop with black numberings. Now let me try it on my 16cm circumference wrist. The size of the watch looks pretty alright on my wrist. However, as I've said earlier on, the strap itself is crap. So I would recommend, if you were to get the SARB or have a chance to get the SARB, it's best that you change the strap. So is the SARB all finish overshadowed by the SPB? Well, it really depends. I know many of you there probably prefer a watch without that cyclop, and that cyclop is probably a deal breaker. Hence, you then lean towards the SARB instead of the SPB. The poorer quality strap on the SARB shouldn't be a deterrent, as you can easily change that out with any bracelet and strap in the market. Both watches are sold around the same price point, which is around 3,000 ringgit. However, I do think that the SPB is a better value watch, as it has a newer movement and has a longer power reserve as well. However, I think aesthetic wise, I would go for the SARB because of the date. As I've mentioned before, I always prefer the color on the backdrop of the date to match with the color of the dial. However, in this case, both these watches does not have the same color. Be that as it may, I think the black backdrop on the date looks better as compared to the white in the SPB. The white just makes it stands out and makes the watch not look symmetrical. The lime green dial on the SARB also makes the watch looks a little bit more vintage feel as compared to the more modern looking SPB. Although the SPB is a re-release of the SARB, I find it to be an entirely different watch. So there you have it. I think the SARB will become a collectible if it's not already is. To sum it up, at its price range, I think the SARB is a good watch and it's worthwhile considering if you don't mind the green and the gold. If you like this kind of video, please do me a favor and hit that like, share and subscribe button, and I'll promise to upload more videos like this. Until the next one, thank you for watching.